How do cult leaders infect people's minds? Dr. Bandy Lee has some thoughts. Check it out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel.
Yes, thanks for having me back. When we first published The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump in 2017, we were emphasizing that despite its title, Donald Trump was not our main focus. His presidency was a statement about the state of the nation, the state of its public mental health in particular, and of which he was a barometer at the time of his election, and then the chief accelerant and exacerbator once he was in office. And so we are seeing the exaggerated effects of what he has accentuated and continues to perpetuate. His personality has become a cult-like figure, as you have noted. And this is what we were warning against when we said his dangers were greater than people were suspecting, that they would grow over time, and that they would spread without containment.
Cults are tough things. A very, very close friend of mine used to work with Ted Patrick back in the 80s and 90s, basically deprogramming people who had, gotten into cults. There was it was a thing back then. And then he went off and became a super Orthodox Jew and lives in Jerusalem in a Hasidic community. And he's still one of my very best friends. We talk on Skype probably every month. And I once asked him, I said, did you trade, because he started in a cult, then he got in with Ted and was deprogramming people, and now he's, in this religious group. And I said, did you trade in one cult for another? And he said, well, there is this thing about being a member of a group, and having other people have your back and having a shared worldview and that's real and that may or may not be toxic depending on the circumstances. What are your thoughts on all that? How do we deal with, not on religious, whatever you want to call that, but how we deprogram people, or how we move them from a toxic cult into a relatively non-toxic cult, like, being a patriotic American?
Yes, that's right. These are real human needs that have been exploited and accentuated because of the conditions that have given rise to their distortion in the first place. And so I think you had noted the new book that I have out, Profile of a Nation, Trump's Mind, America's Soul. I had urgently written it over the summer, first to warn the nation that the election was not going to be the end, and secondly, that he was not likely to be removed very easily. That is because we really have to understand the dynamics, not just of Donald Trump, but of his supporters and the nation as a whole, to be able to solve this problem. And it's better that we think of it as an ecology, since, as you see, we don't have the typical conditions of a cult where people are isolated and a dangerous personality is misleading them and brainwashing them, but rather it's happening nationwide when we have freedom of speech and openness with respect to information. And how does this occur? It occurs mainly through kind of psychological manipulation, and we have to recognize the fact that what we're seeing in a vast portion of the American population is not healthy, rational, and well-informed decision-making, but rather the pattern of what happens in cults or in abusive relationships, where people are cut off from information sources, from access to expertise, and they are insulated from real news sources and led to believing disinformation and fake news as real. And much of this is through psychological techniques. And we have to recognize that this is happening and that we're not really seeing the expressed will of truly healthy thinking.
Dr. Lee, my sincere apologies. I did not realize you had a new book out, and I'm so pleased to hear that you do. I'm really looking forward to reading it. Profile of a Nation is the title. Is there a website for it?
Yes, you can look it up on my website itself. I have a new website, which is bandylee.com, BANDYLEE.com. And yes, it was published through my organization because we had no time to get a publisher. And as you may or may not know, mental health experts have been excluded largely from the media on speaking about this quite systematically. And so I do appreciate your having me on.
It's my pleasure.
That is in itself a symptom of what is happening.
Yeah, I agree. And in the roughly 2.5 minutes we have left before we hit a hard break that I can't control, you said one of the characteristics of a cult is that it cuts people off from information. Just in the last hour, I was talking with a listener who spends a lot of time watching Fox News, and he was pointing out, and I've noticed this too, that there are large chunks of reality that Fox News just doesn't even cover. They, with regard to Donald Trump and this crisis on January 6th, how do you break through? What should America be doing? What should we all be doing to deal with this cult/mental health crisis that, frankly, it has become widespread in the Republican Party? 80% approval of Donald Trump right now.
Yes. So you're correct to identify it as a mental health emergency. In fact, I would say it is the number one emergency of our time. The mental health pandemic is far more harmful and destructive than even the viral pandemic that we're suffering through. So I outlined three steps to improving this, and the cult-like behavior is actually only the tip of the iceberg. And so the first step is to remove the offending agent, which was Donald Trump and his influence. In other words, having a severely symptomatic person, a mentally impaired person in a position of influence was largely responsible for spreading the symptoms. And so his removal from the social media, for example, showed a vast decrease in his influence, and also in terms of the spread of fixed false beliefs that we have seen among his followers. But that is not enough. We have to set limits, firm boundaries, which includes conviction, prosecution, and truly bringing the whole party back to reality as to what is lawful and unlawful, and what is right and wrong, and also what is healthy versus mentally compromised. And the second step that I outline is the fixing a lot of the disinformation system. And third is to correct the socioeconomic conditions that gave rise to the psychological vulnerability in the first place.